I'm sorry, all of you YouTubers. I did not turn your sound on. Uh, Let me keep reading. I'll start this again. Okay, I'll start the reading again so the YouTube at least can have the sound. It's just me. I don't have any IT support over here. It says this: Submit yourself, for the Lord's sake, to every authority instituted among men, whether to king as the supreme authority or to the governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up from evil. Live as servants of God. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear good and honor the emperor. Well, that's interesting, right? An interesting passage for YouTube. That's from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13 to 17. And that word submit, of course, is the first one that raises all of our eyebrows today. This isn't a word that people in the 21st century, I guess we're in now, by 20 years, it's not a word that we come by easily or take very easily. But the truth is, right now, isn't it? I was thinking this morning, we're actually doing a lot of submission, especially to those authorities and rulers over us, to the prime minister of our country, to the premiers of our country, to the mayors, the rest of that. We're doing actually a lot of that submitting in order to help out in this need, in this common good. But the passage actually goes on, and it's not assigned for us to read, so I didn't read it, to quite a lengthy list of people that Peter is instructing this word submission around. He instructs slaves to submit to masters, which definitely causes some challenges for us as we read that and deal with the complexities of slavery in that first century. It talks about wives submitting to your husband, which raises some further eyebrows as we deal with the challenges that has presented throughout years. But then it goes on as well to instruct husbands into a similar way of action, to be submissive and to be considerate to their wives. There's this idea in the scripture, certainly, of mutual submission in a marriage where wives submit to the husbands and the husbands submit back to their wives. And the truth, as I said here, is that this idea of submission, I feel like I got a sneeze coming. See if I can ward it off. The truth of submission, right, is something that really flies in the face of our culture. This culture that's built around this idea of I know what's mine, I get my rights. We're going to talk a little bit further about this on Sunday together. There is a very countercultural message that Peter is presenting to us, this idea of being submissive to anyone. Like, how dare you? I remember, actually I was thinking about this, I remember the old sitcom that I watched as a kid, Family Ties, and if you're old enough, maybe you remember Family Ties as well. Well, the main character, of course, was Alex P. Keaton, and Alex was a Republican. He grew up in the home of these hippie parents who were ardent Democrats. But Alex was this strong free market economic guy. Well, as the show grew on in years, they needed to add cute factor into it. And so the parents have this other child. I don't remember the child's name. And he ends up going to preschool as the sitcom moves along. Well, the parents have gone away in this particular episode, and Alex is given the responsibility of caring for the son throughout the week. He takes the son to daycare on the first day, and he looks around and he sees all these messages, typical daycare messages on the wall, like you need to share, or these kinds of themes. And Alex is clearly frustrated because he's a Republican, and you need to fend for what's yours. Well, the scene flips, and Alex now is bringing his brother, younger brother, to the next day of preschool, and now the son or the brother is wearing this big button on his chest that he's displaying to all the fellow preschoolers, and on the button it simply says, "I know what's mine," which is just awesome. I know what's mine, and that's truly kind of the message of our Western world. Oftentimes, that's mine. I know what's mine. I'm going to fight for what's mine. And Peter here is saying, no, you need to be people as Christ followers who submit yourself to one another. And in this passage here, even to the emperors and the rulers of our land. Well, where does this idea of submission come from? Well, of course, the example that we have in Scripture is Jesus himself, right? Jesus is the one who has submitted himself. In the story we just read a couple of weeks ago, he submitted himself to the authorities, has laid down his life, has been crucified, even at the hands of the authorities. No one has submitted himself like Christ himself submitted. And the purpose behind his submission, also we see then in Scripture, is love. That this is ultimately the demonstration of what love is. And I think that's an important reminder for us. In our world today, love is passed around very often. We need to love one another. We need to be people of love. But what is love? What is ultimately the definition of love? Well, what we see in the example of Christ and in the New Testament is that love is defined ultimately by this act of submission, by this willingly laying down our lives for the benefit and for the care of those that are around us. And Paul then and Peter will pick this theme up and say this is the one another that we need to be with each other, that we need to be one another for one another. We need to lay down our lives for one another. This is the heart of the Christian message. Romans 5 verse 8 says this, if I can flip over to it very quickly. It says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. This is how he demonstrates love, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, right? Christ laid down his life for us. The very heart then of love is this idea of submission. And so when Paul says, lay down your life for the authorities, he's saying, demonstrate your love for them. When he says, slaves, lay down your lives for your masters, he's saying, demonstrate your love for them. And I recognize there's complexities in there that we would need to teach about. But when he says the same deal, wives, lay down your lives, husbands, lay down your lives, he's saying this is how we ultimately demonstrate our love for one another. Now, as the one counter to this, we ask the question, of course, is there ever a time where we do not submit, where we withhold our submission? And the answer to that is yes. There are certain times where we do not submit. And interestingly, in the lectionary, the passage that we are given from the Old Testament comes from Exodus chapter 3, where Moses is being called by God to stand up against the emperor of Egypt, against the Pharaoh of Egypt, to overrule, to override against his abuse and his subjugation of the Israelite people. And so indeed there are times, right, where we do not submit. And I think especially for those of you that are women that are listening in on this, where you find yourself in abusive relationships. And there we need to have wisdom that matches together with justice to know how to respond in these situations, to respond with thoughtfulness and with care. And those of us that stand around people that are being oppressed, we also need to lean into these times and stand up and advocate for those people that are being oppressed in some way, to support them as they stand up against things that are also not right. But the theme here, of course, generally is that we would be a people that lay down our lives for one another. And I wonder where that sits with you today, as you look around your family, as you think about your work, as you think about your place in the society right now and all that's being asked of you. I wonder where this a core Christian message finds root in your heart today. Where is the Spirit encouraging you to say, this is what it means to lay down your life for your family, for your friends, for your co-workers? What does that look like to live in this way? And Peter reminds us that living this way is ultimately about our testimony for Christ. So may you be blessed with that. May you be encouraged. May you be instructed and uplifted in this idea that Peter presents to us. And I trust that this carries you well into the weekend. Tomorrow we will not be having our normal 12-12. I'm going to take the day off, but we will be gathering together on Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Make sure you bring your bread and your wine for that. Get ready for that. And the scripture that we're looking at is Acts chapter 2, which I'll talk about. It's interesting that we're doing that because that's kind of unbeknownst to me where we ended up after last week's simple online on Sunday morning. Anyway, that's enough for now. We will see you all Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. The Lord be with you. Bye, everyone.